Hello and welcome to the Launch Lady Show. My name is Brooke and I am the Launch Lady. Today, I want to talk about a very specific kind of self doubt that truly only very capable women are experiencing. And it doesn't sound like, I don't know what I'm doing. It sounds like this. Why can't I just stick with something? Why do I always feel the pull to refine, adjust, shift? Is this actually growing anything or am I just self sabotaging my business? When you've had multiple chapters in business, different offers, different identities, different seasons, it's easy to start questioning your stability. You look back and you think, shouldn't I have just picked one thing and stayed with it? Shouldn't I be further by now? And wouldn't I be if I hadn't changed direction so much? And at some point, iteration starts to feel really suspicious to you. Like maybe the common denominator is actually you. But here's what we're going to unpack today. Iteration is not instability. And if you've mislabeled evolution as inconsistency in your business, you're going to force yourself into staying somewhere you've already outgrown just to prove you can. This episode is about understanding the difference between reactive pivots and conscious iteration, because those two things look really similar from the outside, but they build very, very different businesses. So let's talk about it. If you're like me, you've changed directions in your business a time or two. Over the last 20 years, I have launched different businesses more times than I can count. And when you've changed direction more than once like that, a quiet narrative starts to begin to form in your business. Words like, maybe I just can't commit. Maybe I get bored far too easily. Maybe all I do is chase novelty. Maybe I sabotage things just when they start working. Especially in online business culture where niche down and stay there forever is preached like a friggin' gospel. Consistency becomes more of a moral virtue, and change starts to look a lot like weakness. So even if your shifts were intelligent, you start to question them and they start to feel incriminating. But the problem isn't that you've changed, it's that we rarely distinguish why. So let's separate these things very clearly. Instability. Instability is reactive. It looks like you escaping discomfort the second it shows up, or abandoning things mid friction, or pivoting because validation dipped and you're not getting that dopamine hit from the external validation, or changing direction to relieve some sort of anxiety. But iteration is responsive, and it looks like this. It looks like refining what isn't quite right, adjusting based on experiences that you've brought into your life and in your business, integrating lessons, expanding capacity, and updating your identity as you grow. From the outside, both involve change, but from the inside, they feel real different. Instability feels urgent and iteration feels aware. And here's why that's tricky. As capable women, we can make almost anything work. We're good at that. We've proven that. We can override misalignment with discipline. We can push through friction and we can out execute discomfort because we're so friggin' capable, which means that we will stay in something that doesn't quite fit for longer than some people ever would. So when you finally pivot, it actually does not mean that you're unstable. It means that you've tolerated misalignment longer than you should have. And that tension isn't about your ability to commit. It's about whether you're committing to the right thing at this point. And this is where the consistency myth really starts to distort things. Because we've been taught that maturity equals staying put. We've been taught that from generations past. We loyalty to our job and staying somewhere for 50 plus years and retiring with honors, basically. That's something that I saw growing up, and I'm sure many of you did as well. But staying put is only mature if that thing still fits. Staying somewhere that you're miserable or staying somewhere just to make it work because someone said you should is not maturity. That's stubbornness. And if you're going to put consistency out there at the cost of evolution, you're going to create a lot of resentment and identity stagnation and some subtle self betrayal. And that's going to feel not good, my friend. Growth often requires iteration, and iteration requires movement. The goal isn't to eliminate change, it's to make sure that your changes are conscious. So, how can you know whether you're evolving or reacting? I say this over and over. Ask better questions. When you want to pivot, pause long enough to ask questions like, am I moving towards something clearer or am I moving away from something uncomfortable? Does this shift feel grounded or does it feel really frantic? If this decision worked, would it deepen me or is it going to distract me? Because instability feels relieving. Iteration feels like clarifying. Instability is going to quiet that anxiety, but iteration is going to sharpen your direction. And if you're listening to your nervous system very carefully, because these differences are subtle, but they're there. And when I look back at my own journey, this is what stands out the most. Over the last 2 decades, I've had chapters. Some of them lasted for years, some lasted for months, some needed to end. And no, I don't regret a single one of them. Each iteration built discernment. Each shift clarified my identity. And every chapter taught me something about what fits and what doesn't fit. But that growth didn't come from the changing. It came from becoming more conscious about why I was changing. That's the difference between compounding and scattering. And that's what I want to leave you with today. You are allowed to evolve. You're allowed to refine who you are, to have chapters in your business. Just don't confuse conscious iteration with instability. They look similar from the outside and can even feel similar on the inside, but one is building depth and the other builds noise. And you are far more capable than the narrative that tells you otherwise. If this episode resonated with you this week, I want you to check the show notes for my free Better Questions, Clearer Decisions guide. It's going to help you to identify what you're actually responding to before you make your next move. So until next time, go do the things, and I'm rooting for you.